But to start with, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story, why I started holding meetings like this, what happened to me in my life where I started doing this really strange thing of holding meetings about meditation and about overcoming anxiety. Some of you who've been with me before will have heard this story many times, but I'll tell it anyway. So I was 18, heading off to university, thinking this is going to be the best year of my life. Finally, I'm away from my parents, I'm away from my family, away from the old familiar way of doing things. But it didn't really turn out like that because I wasn't equipped to being an adult. I had a whole load of fear in me, a whole load of anxiety in me that I didn't even really know about until I went to university. Now, I got into a few life-changing situations, life-changing experiences. One was a car crash. I was driving with my friend and he was being a bit silly. He was going 70 miles an hour in a 50-mile-an-hour limit, 60-mile-an-hour limit. We were going along. I knew he was driving too fast. I didn't say anything. He hit the curb, spun across the other side of the road, went bang, head on with this other car. The other car was doing 70 miles an hour as well. So we had a combined impact of 140 miles per hour, or maybe a bit less because we did slam our brakes on a little bit. But anyway, we hit on my side like this, smashed into this car. The car spun through the air, spun through this field. The doors came off, the windows came off. And I remember waking up, kind of a vague memory of a farmer dragging me out the window. And I was laying by the side of the road, blood coming out of my mouth. It was a pretty bad crash, but luckily I didn't have any serious injuries. I just broke my ankle. But it was a near-death experience. It was a very shocking experience for my body. And I just brushed it off. I got on with my life. My broken ankle recovered. I started physio, started getting over it. And I didn't think about the psychological effects that it might have. Anyway, I fast forward a year and I was skydiving. I joined the university skydiving club. And I wanted to learn to become a skydiver. So I did all my training, 2 days intensive training, went up into the sky, and I was jumping out of a plane on my own, not in tandem, on my own. Anyway, I'm sitting there in this plane way up high, and the door opens. I look out like, oh my God, am I really going to just jump out of this plane and plunge to my death? Anyway, I jumped out and I thought the parachute wasn't going to open. So I nearly pulled it away and pulled my reserve. Thankfully, it opened. I did that twice, and that kind of really shocked me. And then about a year after that, I was kayaking, whitewater kayaking. I was a bit of an adventurer back in the day. I liked extreme sports. Anyway, I was in this boat and it was too small for me. And when I flipped under the water, I couldn't get out. So I spent about 3 hours going down this whitewater river, flipping under the boat, not being able to get out, continuously thinking I was going to die. Anyway, you can imagine by now that I would probably have a little bit of anxiety in my body. but I brushed it off. I go drinking, smoking weed, whatever you do when you're a 20-year-old lad. And then there was one evening I was at a music festival in Croatia. And I wasn't massively into drugs or anything, but the music festival had finished, and I was sitting on this beach with my brother about 4 a.m, my brother and a few friends. And I took one drag on a cannabis joint, one drag, and it just opened me up to this incredible experience, expansive experience. Now, for about 10 seconds or whatever it was fascinating. It was amazing. But then very quickly, I entered into this state of just the most intense fear, the most intense panic. And what happened was that drag on that cannabis spliff, it opened me up to all the fear and all the pain that I had been pushing away my whole life. And it was like a lifetime's worth of emotion and pain came up to the surface in one big go. We all have this incredible subconscious ability to repress our fear, to repress our pain. And for some reason, when I smoked that spliff, that ability kind of wasn't there. So all of my fear, all of this stuff just came flooding up into the forefront of my consciousness. And long story short, I entered into a period of the most incredibly intense psychological suffering. You wouldn't believe the panic that I experienced, the dread that I experienced, the depersonalization, the social anxiety. I experienced so much fear in the months and the years following that. It was absolutely unbelievable. And because the fear was so bad, because the fear was so intense, because my anxiety was so intense, I had an incredibly strong desire to overcome it. I had an incredibly strong desire to find freedom from it. And so I went on this mad search. I was visiting this psychologist about an hour and a half from where I lived. I would get the train to see her every week. I was reading endless self-help books, cognitive behavioral therapy, all of these Western psychological models to try and overcome my anxiety and to try and overcome this panic, this fear, this trauma that I was experiencing. Anyway, after about 3 years of this, going down the route of Western psychology, nothing had really changed. I'd gotten better. I'd gotten a little bit better. I wasn't in that crisis period, but I was still suffering. I was still suffering a lot. I was still caught in this anxiety, caught in this fear. Nothing had really changed. And that's when I was introduced to the first fundamental principle that I'm going to tell you about now. But before I do that, I'm just going to go and grab a blanket because I'm getting a little bit cold and I haven't got the heating on. So I'm sorry about that. I'll be 1 minute. Oh, there's a blanket right here. What's happening? So, what is it then? What is the first fundamental principle for healing anxiety? Well, I was taught by this psychologist slash spiritual teacher from America that instead of trying to push my feelings away, instead of trying to get rid of my feelings, instead of trying to get rid of my anxiety, I needed to move towards it. I'd spent my whole life trying to get away from my feelings. I'd spent my whole life trying to get away from this anxiety, trying to get away from my feelings. We all do this. We all don't want to feel what we have inside. And that's what the ego is. The ego mind is the activity of trying to get away from our feelings. So this psychologist, I was reading her book, and it was teaching me to, instead of trying to escape the feelings, instead of trying to get away from the anxiety, instead of trying to fix it, to treat it like a child. What would you do if a child came up to you and they were afraid? They were really scared. Would you push that child away? Would you tell them to get away? I need to fix you. I need to get rid of you. Get lost. Or would you pick that child up, hold them, bring them close, and hold them for as long as it takes for them to feel safe again? This is what she said to me. And there was one night, and you guys who've been on these calls before will know this story. But there was one night I was watching X Factor with my family. I was lying on the sofa. I'd read this book a month ago. I'd been in contact with this teacher. And I started having this panic attack. I started panicking. The fear had come up. It had come into my mind. And I thought, I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to lose my mind. And in that moment, I looked over at this photo of myself as a little 9-year-old boy. I was playing rugby in this photo. And I looked so innocent then, but so brave and so happy at the same time. And then I was looking at myself, feeling myself, and I was in this state of such panic. I was this adult, but I'd grown somehow into this terrified, this afraid, this worried, this fearful adult. And so I looked at the photo, and then I grabbed my own hand like this. And I said to the little boy in the photo, and I said to myself, I've got you. I've got you. I've got you. And when I said this, something magical happened. My awareness, which for all these years I'd been struggling with anxiety, had been up here in the worrying, in the thinking, in the panicking mind. My awareness dropped down into everything that I had been running from. My awareness dropped into the feelings of panic. And in that moment, something happened. The split within that I'd been living with healed. The split within came together. And I felt whole again. I felt complete again. I felt a connection to myself. I felt a connection to my own being. And I was never a spiritual person. I was the least spiritual person you could find. I didn't believe in spirituality this whole time up until that day. And I knew in that moment, this is what people mean by spirituality. This is what spiritual means. I didn't know it. There was no concept. I felt it. That instant of dropping into my feelings, bringing my awareness fully down into my feelings, fully feeling the feelings, coming out of the mind and into my body, I had connected with myself again. I connected with my body. I connected with my heart, and I connected with my being. And it was as if the world slowed down. I'd spent so long lost in this dream of fear, this dream of panic. And finally, I was back home. Home within my own heart, home within my own body, touching in with my true nature, my beingness. The same beingness that you see when you look into the eyes of a baby or a small child. You know, when a baby is just sitting there, maybe in their pram or in their cot, and they just have this smile for no reason arising on their face, and you see this light shining out of their eyes. What's the reason for that? The reason is they are, without knowing it, touching in with their own being. They are experiencing their own being. Now, for somebody with anxiety, for somebody who's been lost in this worried thinking mind, whose attention has been up in this thinking mind for maybe years, maybe since you were a child, since you were 10 or 9, especially when you're a teenager and when you're an adult, if you've been a worried, anxious person, your attention has been so in the thinking, so in the activity of anxiety, of panic, or whatever it is. Because the pull of that fear has been so strong, we lose touch with our being. We lose touch with our natural state of causeless joy. Now, in my opinion, and from my experience, one of the number one ways in which we can reconnect with our being, in which we can reconnect with our hearts, in which we can just feel good again, is through the doorway of our pain. Fear and anxiety can be seen as the greatest gift you will ever and you could ever receive. Because within fear, within anxiety, there is an incredible opportunity. An incredible opportunity to reconnect with what you really are. To reconnect with that childlike innocence, that childlike joy, that sense of causeless contentment and satisfaction. This love inside. Our anxiety isn't an obstacle to awakening. Our anxiety is the doorway. Our anxiety is the awakening. Now, awakening is a big fancy word. I don't usually like to use it. Now, let me try and explain this a little bit better by telling you how the ego is formed. I'm not sure what everyone's backgrounds are here, whether you've been into spirituality or meditation for a while, or whether you're new to it, or whether you have never really thought about it before. But the ego is this voice. It's identification with the voice in the head. And by the voice in the head, I mean the thoughts moving through the mind. It's the belief that I am these thoughts. We all have this stream of continuous thinking moving through the mind. Almost everyone on this planet has this stream of continuous thinking moving through the mind. A little child doesn't. A little 1-year-old, 2-year-old child doesn't have an ego. Does a little child have an ego? No. But adults do. Adults develop this ego. There's this continuous stream of thinking moving through the mind, and because we pay it attention, we become identified with it. We start to believe that that thinking mind is what we really are. Now, somebody with anxiety probably has a very strong thinking mind, and someone with anxiety has likely become quite identified with this fearful thinking in the mind. So why does this develop? I'm just going to try and explain this quite quickly because this webinar's only an hour long, and I want to get onto the second fundamental principle soon. But when we're kids, our emotions are too much for us to be with. Our emotions are too much for us to feel. It's much easier when something emotional happens to a child, when a child goes into school and the teacher shouts at them and they experience fear. That fearful emotion is too much for them to feel. So what the child starts doing is they start escaping into dreams in the mind. They start escaping into thinking in the mind, thoughts in the mind. Now, what happens is an emotional reaction happens to the child. Maybe dad shouts at them. Maybe they start feeling some weird energy from their parents, or one of their friends says something mean to them. And an emotion comes up. It's too much for them to feel. So they come up into thinking. And then the emotion settles down. They come out thinking and they're back in their body again. They're back connected with their being again. But then something else happens that creates emotion in them. The nervous system gets activated. It feels too much. They can't be with it. They can't feel it. They don't have the caregivers, the necessary caregivers to give them the love and compassion that they need. Because most of our caregivers hadn't been through this healing journey. So if they can't be there for themselves, they can't be there for you. So this activation happens and they come up into dreaming, into thinking again as a way to escape, as a way to not feel the feelings. And then eventually the trigger dies down and they're back in their body again. They're back in their heart again. They're feeling the joy of being again. But then something else happens and they're back into thinking. And this happens again and again. This escape into thinking starts happening. Now, for someone who's developed anxiety, what's happened is, as you grow through the childhood years into the teenage years, this continuous movement from being relaxed and in the body and in your being, connected to your being, this continuous movement up to thinking becomes too much. It takes too much energy to keep coming up, escaping into this. And so what happens is we get to this point where we just stay up here. The activation stays in the body and we just stay up in this thinking. And that's the development of the ego. And then we can just live in a continuous state of being in this fearful, worrying thinking. What's going to happen to me in the future? Thinking this person thinks this person thinks that. The anxious person has all of these thoughts. And these thoughts are all there because there is a resistance to feeling the feelings in the body. There is a desire to get away from the feelings in the body. And this is subconscious. We might not even realize that we're doing it. But the reason that the thinking is happening is because of our unwillingness to feel our feelings. And this has been happening for so many years that it has just become the way we are. It's become this ingrained habit to be always in the thinking. Now, one of the main things that I teach people in order to overcome anxiety is to come back down into the body. There's two main things I teach, the two fundamental principles. This is the first one. I'll get onto the second one soon. The main thing I teach is to come back down into the body. Now, let me just give you a practical, let me just show you practically how you can do this. There's many ways that I teach this, and I'm just going to give you one or two today. Now, let's use a real life example. Anxiety manifests in so many different ways in so many different people. But it's basically the same process within everybody. To varying degrees. Somebody, it can come as panic. Somebody, it can come as more subtle anxiety. For some people, it can be triggered by social situations. For others, it can be triggered by worrying about their health. For others, it can be triggered by worrying about existence. What the hell are we doing here? What is life? But the process, the mechanism within our body and mind is always the same. So I'm going to use an example, and I'll just make up a random example. Say you're somebody who has health anxiety, somebody who worries about their health, and you can apply this to whatever your specific type of anxiety is. But someone who has a health anxiety, they will be kind of feeling maybe okay in the day, maybe a bit anxious. And then someone will say something to them about health, or they'll read something online about some disease. Now, what that will do, that will create a thought in their mind. I might die next year of this disease. That fearful thought in the mind will create a fearful emotion in the body. That fearful emotion in the body will rise up and create more fearful thoughts in the mind. Oh my God, I'm going to die. Oh, I need to go and see the doctor. And those thoughts will create more emotion in the body, which will create more fearful thinking, which will create more emotion in the body. And this vicious cycle of anxiety is created, whereby we just feel like we're lost in this thinking, we're lost in this worrying, and there's no way out. And what most people do is they distract themselves, they smoke a cigarette, they drink, they watch YouTube videos, they go for a run, anything to get away from it, anything to try and get out of it. But most people don't have a way of actually coming out of that reaction. Anxious people have lost their power to their own minds. And you can take your power back. The way that you do this As soon as you notice that a thought's come into your mind that is fearful, and as soon as it's created the anxious feeling in the body, what's happened, the thought comes in, anxiety starts, you're about to be taken over by it, taken into panic or anxiety or whatever it is. But as soon as you notice it, you're aware of the thought. And the first thing you do is you bring the full extent of your attention straight down into the feeling in the body. You might feel it as a tightness in the heart, butterflies in the belly, a constriction in your shoulders, a clamping of the throat. But there will be some feeling associated with the anxiety in the body. Now, the thinking is just happening of its own accord. You are not doing the thinking is happening of its own accord. If you were doing it, you would just stop doing it. But you're not in control of it, it's just happening. But what you are in control of is the movement of your attention. So what you need to do, you move your attention down away from the thinking and into the feelings. And if you place all of your attention in the feeling, whatever you can feel, even if it's just a little bit of tightness in the heart, a little bit of butterflies in the belly, and you place all of your attention in that feeling, you cut the vicious cycle of anxiety. Because when your attention is fully in the feeling, you're not fueling the thinking anymore. Now, when your attention is fully in the feeling will start to grow. It might start to grow a little bit. It might start to get a bit bigger. And what we naturally do is I'm scared of this feeling. We're conditioned from when we were little kids to be scared of our feelings. We're scared of it. I need to get away from it. So where do you go? Up into thinking, the fearful thoughts. You escape into the fearful thoughts. So as soon as you notice that you're being pulled into the fearful thoughts, you bring your attention back down into the feeling in the body, and you stay, you stay, you stay. And the feeling will grow. And part of you will really want to go up into thinking, but you just stay. The feeling will grow. You keep your awareness in it. You keep your attention in it, and you let it grow. And you will realize, if you stay with the feeling without giving attention to the thinking, you won't be suffering anymore. Because there is no suffering in the feeling itself. Suffering only happens when the feeling rises up into thinking, we become identified with it and we get pulled into being this fearful one in the mind. But when a thought comes in, a fearful thought comes in, and it's about to set off the vicious cycle, and instead of getting lost, coming up into thinking, you bring the whole of your attention down into your body, down into your feelings, you've cut that vicious cycle. It's an absolute miracle. I had been getting caught in these loops of fearful, anxious thinking, actually my whole life to a certain extent. But for a few years, all day, every day, panic, caught in that. And then one day, I just brought my attention down into the feeling and I stayed. Actually, I'm going to give another example from my life, because there's two kind of defining moments where I really started to learn this. The first I've already explained to you. It was when I was on the sofa with my family and I looked at that photo, came into my feelings. But I didn't know what had happened then. That just kind of happened. I didn't really have any understanding of like why it happened or what the process was so fully. But there was a moment where something clicked in me and I really came to understand this miracle of coming out of our anxious, our anxiety, being able to come out of our anxiety. And that was, I was on the train down to London. And I started going into for years, I'd had this fear I was going to lose my mind, this fear I was going to go crazy. And this thought came in to my mind, Chris, you're going to lose your mind. You're going to go crazy. That thought came in and it set off this panic in my body. And the normal thing that would have happened then, that panic would have created more thinking, more panic, more thinking, and I would have been pulled in and caught within it. Something happened. The thought came in, Chris, you're going to go crazy. And straight away, I knew a feeling was going to arise in my body, and I felt the feeling arise. And I just dropped my attention down into, I think it was in my heart, this feeling of panic in my heart. And I stayed. Now, everything in me was telling me, this is dangerous. You can't stay with this feeling. You need to go think. You need to think. You have to think. But I knew if I went into thinking, I would suffer terribly. And so I just stayed with the feeling. And I stayed. And oh my God, when my attention was in the feeling, I wasn't suffering. When my attention was just in the feeling in my heart, I wasn't suffering. There was an energy of fear there, but I wasn't being pulled into that thinking. And I just stayed. I stayed. And something was trying to pull me back into the mind, but no, I stayed. I stayed in the feeling. And the feeling started getting bigger. And I just stayed with it. And a moment came where that pull into the mind was no longer happening. So I just need to let somebody in. And I was free. I was free. I consciously became free from my anxiety. And I was just smiling to myself. And when we do this, it is an incredibly powerful spiritual tool, an incredibly powerful tool for spiritual awakening. Now, what do I mean by that? Most adults in this world are in a state of discontentment, a state of feeling something is missing, something isn't quite right. Not really feeling the fullness of life, not really feeling this joy for life, this causeless joy. Now, a child does feel this. A child is naturally connected, like I said, connected to their heart, connected to their being. They're in their bodies. They're not in their minds so much thinking. They're in their bodies. So they're awake. They're awake to so much more than adults. Now, when you start practicing this, coming into the feeling and not being pulled into that mind, it takes you into a place of no mind, or at least very little mind. Because the only reason we're not happy is because our thinking mind is covering up our natural state of happiness. Happiness isn't something you need to create. Peace isn't something you need to create. It is your true nature. It is your natural state. Peace and happiness is your natural state. It's just that it's been covered by thinking and feeling. It's been covered by identification with the thinking. So when you come into your feelings, the thinking mind, you withdraw attention away from that thinking mind. And your mind is much quieter. And when your mind is quieter, your natural causeless happiness just bubbles up to the surface. You might smile a lot more. You might laugh a lot more. Straight after the experience on the sofa in X Factor with the photo, I started laughing again. I could almost cry now. I hadn't laughed for years. I hadn't really been happy for years. And I remember watching an episode of Friends, and I watched Friends all the time, even when I was going through that crisis period. And Ross Geller was being his usual idiot self. And I just started laughing, but really laughing. It was amazing. Because when we're caught in that anxiety, caught in that mind, we might laugh superficially because other people are laughing. But the joy isn't really bubbling out of us. It's an amazing, amazing process to go through this transformation. I wish I had longer with you guys tonight so I could go into more detail about it. But I do need to get onto the second fundamental principle. But I'm going to send you a little video this week because I want to give you a meditation. I haven't had time to go into it. Usually when I run these sessions, I guide people into this experience so they get a felt sense of it. You might have got a felt sense of it just through me talking about it, but I'm going to send you a little video this week, 10-minute video, where we come back into the body in a really gentle way, and it can really give you this felt sense understanding. So please remind me if you don't receive that this week, but I should remember to send it to you all. There's a lot to this. There's a lot to explain within one webinar. But I want to jump onto the second fundamental principle, and I might have kind of covered it a bit. And usually the way I talk about this fundamental principle, the way I give it as a kind of bullet point would be, you're not the thoughts inside of your head. You're the one who is aware of them. You are the awareness within which your mind is arising. You are the awareness within which these thoughts are arising. There is something here right now that is aware of your experience. There's a body sitting on a chair or a bed or wherever you are. There's feelings. There's the experience of the room. There's the experience of the computer or the phone. There's sights. There's sensations. There's thoughts. There's feelings. But there's also the one who is aware of it. You are the one who is aware of your experience. You are not the thoughts inside of your head. You are the awareness within which they are arising. These thoughts have to be arising within something. They're arising within you. Awareness. Now I'm going to try and think of another way to explain this. Okay. So we have this stream of thinking moving through the mind. An anxious person has a stream of fearful thoughts moving through the mind. Now, most anxious people are identified with their thoughts. They're completely entwined within these thoughts. They're believing the thoughts to be true. They're believing the thoughts to be who and what they are. Now, what you need to start doing is you need to start watching your thoughts. You need to start watching your mind. You need to become aware of that thinking. Because as soon as you see a thought, you cannot be that thought. You must be the one who sees it. You must be the one who is aware of it. The first step to this is just becoming aware of the thinking. As much as you can throughout the day, becoming aware of the voice inside the head, the automatic thinking process going on in the mind, the realizing that you are not in control of that. Your heart is beating. The cells in your body are multiplying and dividing. Are you doing that? Are you beating your heart? I'm certainly not beating my heart. Are you doing anything with the cells in your body? Are you doing your digestion? The digestion is just happening. Thoughts are just moving. You're not doing them. Anxious thinking is just happening. You are not doing it. Now you can say, yeah, but I can start thinking there's a pink elephant over there, and then I start thinking there's a pink elephant over there. But even that is just happening. You're not the one who's done that. That's all just happening. You're the awareness within which it is arising. And this awareness within which your thoughts are arising is not suffering. This awareness within which your fearful, anxious thoughts are arising is free. This awareness is at peace. And the more we come to recognize it, the more we give value to this awareness, which is knowing our experience, the more and more peaceful we become. Because you go from being identified, caught, entwined within fearful thinking and fueling it, caught within that, to coming into this spacious, peaceful place of awareness, this place of being aware. And it is a subtle shift. Yet it makes the world of difference. Instead of being an anxious person, you are aware of an anxious person happening inside of you. Instead of being an anxious mind, which is suffering, you are aware of an anxious mind happening within you. That is a huge difference. That is the matter of a life and death. And what I mean by that is, for someone who's completely struggling, completely lost in anxious thinking, this can really save them. Even if it's just subtle, it's like, okay, I'm not that. I'm not that anxiety. I'm the one who knows it. I'm the one who's witnessing it. And at first, we might hear this and we're still kind of entwined in it, caught in this anxious, worried ego. But over time, the more you listen to talks like this, the more you practice certain methods of self-inquiry or meditation or whatever it is, and I teach lots of different methods to go through this, the less entwined and identified with this you become, the more you are just touching into and in touch with this presence of awareness, the more you are knowing your own being and the less you are suffering. And that anxious thinking mind, who you've believed yourself to be, starts to slowly, gradually, over time, over the months, over the years, it starts to settle down. It starts to dissolve. And you become more and more free, more and more at peace, and you feel more and more love inside. You smile a lot more. You laugh a lot more. You're not afraid of life anymore. You're not afraid to die anymore. You're not afraid anymore. So many people on this planet are living in fear. And it doesn't help that we've got this media continuously pumping out fear to everybody. I won't get into that. But so many people are living in fear. And what we really need on this planet is people who have discovered their fearless nature, have discovered what they really are beyond the mind, which isn't afraid. Now, a little analogy's just come to me. And maybe this isn't to do with the two fundamental principles, but it's come to me to share anyway. I always used to watch, you know, those movies or TV shows where you have, back in the day, you know, thousands of years ago, there would be an army on this side of the field, and then another army on this side of the field. And there would be the kind of general on the horse running back and forth, and they would be getting ready to charge at each other. And in these movies, when I was watching this, I'd think, how the hell can they run towards a group of people with swords and spears who are trying to kill them, and they're probably going to die? You know, when most people in in my world, most people in this Western world get afraid over the littlest things. How could these people back then be so brave? Well, I think we all have this warrior within us. There is an aspect of our being which is completely courageous. There is an aspect of our being that is so strong, so fearless, so powerful. And I don't mean powerful in terms of being domineering or being in power over other people, just an internal sense of strength. And it's not a physical strength, it's just a, I'm okay. I'm not afraid. Nothing can hurt me. I'm not afraid of my emotions anymore. I'm not afraid of fear anymore. And this starts to wake up within you when you start applying these two fundamental principles to your life. And people with anxiety, people who are suffering from fear, have an incredible opportunity that many people who do not experience the same level of fear and anxiety do not have. If you've experienced trauma, if you've had really difficult things happen in your past, you have an incredible opportunity. Because that fear, when met with your awareness, can open you up to this fearless presence. every emotion that we have inside is energy. Fear is an energy. Sadness is an energy. Shame is an energy. Anger is an energy. Now, most men and women too, but we're all men, so I'll say men, most men are so afraid of their feelings, not consciously, unconsciously, that they're continuously just in the thinking. They're not ever willing to feel their feelings. Yet if you do start to meet your feelings, if you start to meet the fear, to meet the anger, to meet the shame, to meet the sadness, there is a gift within each emotion. And the energy of it, when it's dense and contracted down into an emotion of, say, fear, it feels like there's a density there. But when you meet it with your awareness, and it starts to grow and to open up within you, it opens up your nervous system and it transforms into what I used to call its opposite. But that doesn't entirely make sense, but it transforms into something amazing. There is so much transformation within our emotions. And this is the true meaning of Tantra. You may have heard of Tantra, and lots of people think of it as being sort of sexual practices and all of this. And that's part of Tantra. But the true Tantra is when we meet our emotions with our presence, with our awareness, and we transform. Damn, I wish I had longer to speak to everybody, because I feel like there's so much more to go into around this. But I'm going to be drawing it to a close in a minute. So I'm going to go into questions in a moment. If anybody has any questions, you can type them in the chat. So the first question: which type of meditation should we be listening to every day for anxious muscle tensing that can't be controlled? I think I know what you're referring to. We had a one-to-one, 30-minute one-to-one call, I think, recently. So the muscle tensing, that's a symptom of anxiety. What you're referring to is different. It could mean different things to different people, but what you're referring to, that kind of tensing that happens when the anxiety comes up, that's a symptom of the fear. So what I would recommend practicing, essentially there's two main types of meditation, and they're based on the two fundamental principles in the way I teach. One would be sitting and noticing the thoughts coming away from the mind, waking up here in the mind, seeing the thoughts, realizing you're not the thoughts, gaining more clarity, not believing the thoughts. And that will all help, because when you don't believe the thoughts, they're not going to be creating the reaction in the body. It's only when we believe a thought that it creates an emotion in the body. And we can all try this now. Say to yourself in your mind, when I next walk outside, a pink elephant's going to fall on my head and kill me. When you have that thought, a pink elephant's going to fall on my head when I walk outside, it doesn't really cause you anxiety, because you know that that's not going to happen because you don't believe that thought. Now, actually, 99.999% of the anxious, fearful thoughts we have aren't true. Yet, because we believe them, the anxious reaction happens. And in your case, you'll be having thoughts coming through your mind, maybe when you're going into social situations or whatever it is. And you believe those thoughts. They're going to think people are going to think I'm an idiot. They'll be judging me, whatever it is. That creates the emotion in the body. And because you're believing the thoughts, it starts triggering that tensing, muscle tensing. So that's one way to meditate. Meditate by sitting, becoming aware of the mind. And you'll need guided meditations to do this. You'll need somebody to guide you at first to do this. The other type of meditation, and this is something that I teach a lot of, is meditations to come back into the body. Because when you're going into the anxious situation and the feelings come up in your body that create the thoughts that start creating this tensing, if you manage to come into the body, and this takes a bit of practice, but when you come into the body and you're with the feelings in the body, feeling into your hands, your feet, your legs, your arms, your belly, all the feelings, feeling your body, naturally, your awareness, your attention is soothing to your body. This nun, I can't remember where I heard it, but this nun, someone asked this nun, what's the difference? No, what is attention? And this nun said, attention is love. And that is kind of true. It might feel like you don't really understand that right now. But the simple act of giving our attention to our body we're giving care, we're giving love to our body, and that's all that anxiety needs. What does an anxious child need to soothe their anxiety? An anxious child needs love. Anybody who's anxious needs love. You know, we're all grown-up men. We're unlikely to spend much time, if any, you know, lying in our mother's laps or lying in someone's arms and they're giving us love. So we need to give it to ourselves. And one way we do this is through the movement of attention, bringing attention into the body. When you bring your attention into your body, your awareness comes into your body, and you're literally holding your emotions with your awareness. You're holding your emotions in love. And that can help them settle down. That helps the nervous system settle down, because what's happening is the nervous system's coming up into sympathetic activation. Sympathetic is fight or flight. But when you bring attention to the nervous system, when you bring attention to the body, when you bring your awareness into the body, just like when you pick up a child, the child's nervous system goes from sympathetic fight or flight into parasympathetic rest and digest, rest and relax. Your nervous system settles down with your attention, with your awareness. Now I have there's lots of different ways of guiding this. And if you are interested, on the program, the 12-week program, there's new meditations every week which can guide you through this. But really, it's all going to help you. It's all going to help you. Anytime you meditate, you are doing something so good that just the simple fact of sitting undistracted is so good for you. Your nervous system is craving to be given space to unwind. So just the simple fact of sitting and trying to meditate, just the simple fact of sitting and being is really good. One of the reasons people don't heal and don't overcome these things is because they never give themselves the space. They go from distraction to distraction to distraction. Get up in the morning, straight on the phone. Put the phone down, straight on the laptop. Get into the car, radio on. Distraction, 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 without giving yourself space. And actually, I think the number one reason why I have managed to make quite some progress with this is because I've given myself a lot of space, especially when I first started meditating. I gave myself a lot of space. I dropped all the distractions. Didn't watch TV, radio, never put the radio on in the car, didn't listen to music. It was just all about giving myself space. And I was quite full on with it. I used to do sort of 10 hours of meditation a day and all this sorts of stuff. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that much. But an hour a day would be good. Half an hour twice a day would be good. If you're really keen, really committed, 2 hours a day would be good. But an hour a day, giving yourself space, undistracted, sitting, being, things will start to change, because you'll just start to notice that mind more and more. And when you notice the mind, you're not identified with the mind. You're not caught in the mind. You are becoming the awareness within which the mind is arising. And that awareness is free. All you need to do is give yourself space. Okay, Dom, do you have a question?
Yeah. Well, I've just started typing like how to not give so much importance to the thoughts that arise within the space, because like you mentioned about the kind of just being the, like, I guess being the observer of it, but when it's those thoughts that kind of trigger the like a spiral, is it just trying to get back into the feeling? It's like when there's so much power around these thoughts, and then like maybe your physical environment like reflects the kind of whatever situation you're in, and it's and then like you kind of just want to cut everything out and just, you know, like close everything off, you know, shut your eyes and like disconnect from everything. But it's sometimes very difficult just to kind of hold yourself in that and not be so kind of involved in the thought or afraid of the thought.
Great question, man. Thank you for asking. So first of all, when you're in a sort of physical environment that is bringing up a lot of anxiety, say you've got social anxiety, you're around people and there's lots of stuff going on, it's quite hard then to suddenly be like, okay, I'm going to do this thing that I've been told to practice, and I'm going to become aware of my mind and not get pulled into it, because the very situation is just bringing up that anxiety, and it can be too much to practice straight away in these sorts of situations. So what you need to do is you need to practice. At first you've got to take yourself away from the situations and practice somewhere where you are not so much in that triggering situation. You practice in both. Straight away you stop practicing in both. But the more you practice in everyday life, when you're not in such intense triggering situations, the easier it will then become when you go into these triggering environments or situations. So I just want to say that the more you practice, the easier it becomes. But the first part of your question about what do you do when you're in the space of awareness and the thoughts are arising, but the thoughts are so strong that they're pulling you in. So again, like I said, I've been in that so many times, so many thousands and thousands of times. And there's two things that I could say about it. Firstly, when a trigger situation comes up, yes, at first you have to take yourself away to practice this. So a trigger situation comes up, something comes up that brings up this anxiety, this strong feeling, and starts creating these strong negative thoughts. So I used to take myself away. I'd go for a walk. I'd go and sit in, even when I was at work, I'd go and sit in the toilet, just sit in the toilet for 10 minutes. And really, I would become really conscious, really aware of the thought. Because actually, if you're really, truly aware of the thought, it will not pull you into suffering. What can happen is you can be aware of the thought, and then you can start becoming less aware, more sort of identified with it, and then it can pull you in. But what happens is, just with practice of coming to see the mind, this space becomes more and more available to you, and your ability to stay within the space of awareness grows and grows. And it's just practice, really. You come away from the mind gradually, more and more over time. And eventually, the same thoughts that would have pulled you in 3 months ago or 6 months ago no longer have that power to pull you in anymore. And you become free from it. Having said that, for some mind patterns, especially panic mind patterns, can be so strong that second fundamental principle of coming into the space of awareness, actually, it's just come to me to give you one exercise to do. So I can, if something comes that feels important to say, I just go with it. But when you notice that you're in the mind, when you're caught in the mind, you can ask yourself the question, who knows or is aware of this worrying thinking? And when you ask yourself that question, who knows or is aware of this worrying thinking? Or you ask yourself the question, what knows or is aware of this worrying thinking? Then that takes you to the experience of that which is aware of it. And then it might pull you in again. You notice you're in it. And so you ask yourself the question again, what knows or is aware of this worrying thinking? And then it takes you out again. And every time you get pulled in, you can ask yourself this question, what knows or is aware of this worrying thinking? It takes you out again. And over time, that's why I say anxiety is the greatest spiritual tool, because over time, you will just be more and more space will come into your mind. More and more space will come into your life. And these fearful patterns that used to pull you in all the time will no longer have the power to. Moving on from that, if that doesn't seem to work, if the mind pattern seems so strong that you aren't finding peace with that method, then forget about the mind completely. The thinking mind is just happening of its own accord, but it is driven by fearful emotions in the body. It is given fuel. It is fueled by the fearful emotions in the body. The fear in the body rises up and gives fuel, gives power to the thinking. So maybe coming away from it like that isn't enough to cut that link from the feeling. And if that's the case, you need to take the other approach, the one that I call the first fundamental principle. And by the way, there's no specific order. I don't know why I called that one the first and this one the second. I could have spoken about them in either. But you need to implement what I call the first one. So instead of trying to be the space of awareness, instead of trying to witness the thoughts and getting frustrated that it's not working or whatever, you forget about it all. Let the mind do whatever it's doing. You bring the full extent of your attention down into the body, down below the neck. Try this now. Place your hands like this. Everybody can do this. Sorry, we've gone a little bit over time. Feel place your hands like this. So if I ask you to place your attention within your hands, you don't need to look at them. Just by me saying, feel your hands, can you place your attention in your hands? Your attention moves down into your hands. And I could ask you, what do you feel there? Maybe a slight sense of tingling. Maybe pulsating. Maybe you would say that you feel this inner energy of the hands. Whatever you can feel, that's okay. That's great. What you're doing here is you're withdrawing attention away from the thinking mind into them. Now, I call the hands the anchor because they're a very easy thing to feel. There isn't much emotion. Now, in the same way, we can feel our feet, our legs, our arms. You can do that now, feeling into your feet, your legs, your arms. You can also feel the emotion in exactly the same way that you bring the attention down into the hands. You bring the attention down into the emotion, into the panic, into the feeling. It might be really strong and something in you will not want to do it. You just be courageous and you bring your attention into it. It cannot hurt you. We have a subconscious belief that it will overwhelm me. If I really come into it, it will overwhelm me. Yes, it overwhelmed you when you were a 2-year-old child, when you were a 3-year-old child, with that little vulnerable nervous system that needed the mother to hold it. But you're an adult now, your nervous system's growing up, yet we still have the belief that these feelings will overwhelm me. But just keep practicing, stay with it, and you'll come into a completely different way of being with yourself, completely different way of approaching and being with your anxiety. And it can change everything. Just say one more thing. You cannot fix anxiety at the level of thinking. You can't think your way out of anxiety. And this is what most of psychology, CBT, all of this stuff, therapy, well, therapy is good. It's good to talk about stuff. And all of this has its place. But you can't fix anxiety through more thinking, because the thinking that's trying to fix your anxiety is just anxious thinking. It's got nothing to do with thinking. Overcoming, healing anxiety, going through this transformation has nothing to do with thinking. Yet I'm giving you things to practice. You need to apply it. Okay. I might need to be ending soon. Okay, Alex. Alex from the program last year. Cheers, bro. It's good to see you, man.
Yeah, you too. It's weird seeing you again.
Yeah. How long's it been?
It's been almost a year, I think now.
No way.
I've got bad
Wow.
memory when it's thinking back to those things. So I don't know. Maybe it's been 9 months, something like that. But it's been a while.
Yeah.
It has been a while.
Yeah, I noticed some of the names here. I was like, wow, okay, they're all back.
Yeah.
Dom and Henry.
Yeah. How you doing, man?
I'm doing really well.
Yeah.
I'm on my master's right now, just starting my master's. Got into the program well, did an interview which would have absolutely terrified me, and it didn't. It went really well, and I actually got a scholarship as well. So everything's going brilliantly.
Great.
Thanks to you.
Glad to hear it, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm going to move on, but it's
worries.
great. Yeah, great to see you again, mate.
You too.
Okay, so thank you so much, everybody. Good to see you as well, Henry. Okay, everybody. So nice to see you all. I'll send you an email tomorrow, and if you're interested in joining the program, you can check out the information about it then.